Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next video. So today we're going to be doing something that I just wanted to talk about. Really, it's a very interesting topic to me in terms of the 2022 midterms and you know, relating to midterm history and the history of red and blue waves here in in the United States in our congressional elections and in our gubernatorial elections. And I'm going to be explaining why I don't think 2022 is going to be a massive red wave year, but it's also not going to be a very, a strong blue wave year either. And I'm going to explain that. We're going to go back and look at some history. We're not, if this video seems a little disorganized, I apologize. I just kind of thought, screw it, let's go in here. But I've started kind of put in a starting point, and so yeah, let's just get right into it. So in 2006, these were the second midterms under George W. Bush's presidency. He was very unpopular. He was a very unpopular Republican president at this point in time. Among the general populace. And we're going to start in the Senate. So as you can see, in 2004, Republicans won 55 seats ended up gaining 6 seats in the Senate, which, gave them 55, not in terms of their, well, essentially what I mean is they were able to get to 55 seats to 45 Democratic seats. This was a pretty strong margin. Of course, Bush won re-election in 2004 against John Kerry. Republicans made a lot of gains, especially in the South. There were quite a few retirements here. But come 2006, Bush's approval ratings had just collapsed. It was a Democratic wave year. Democrats ended up picking up 6 seats in the Senate. They won, let's go over them. They won in Virginia with Jim Webb, Rhode Island with Sheldon Whitehouse, Ohio with Sherrod Brown, Pennsylvania with Bob Casey. This is Bob Casey Jr. This was a very strong margin. Missouri with Claire McCaskill, on Montana with John Tester, and I believe that's all of them. So you can see Democrats did very, very well, across the country. They won Florida by a safe margin. They won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania by safe margins. West Virginia was solid. Maryland was competitive because of a retiring incumbent. New Mexico was 41 points for Jeff Bingaman. Nevada and Arizona were, these look really weird. It's funny to see. It's a little funny to see Nevada being 14 points for John Enzine, but he was very popular in the state, and this was a drop from his 2000 margin. So, as you can see, this was a pretty good result for Democrats. Let's go to the concurrent House elections. Democrats ended up winning the House, flipping the House as well. It was two. They actually almost completely flipped it. It was 203. Democrats held 203 seats to the Republicans, 232 in 2004. They flip it. Democrats, now had 233 seats to Republicans, 202. So they did an exact flip on the Republicans. Let's go to 2000, or well, actually, before we do that, let's go to the governorships. Democrats also won back the majority in the National Governors Association. Let's look at the flips. I did not have them memorized. I think Arkansas was one of them. So was Ohio. Yeah, Arkansas, Ohio, or no, not Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, Massachusetts, and Colorado. They won. Oklahoma was blue. Wyoming was safe blue. Arizona was safe blue. Um, New Hampshire was safe blue. So this was a really good result all around for Democrats. I know it's weird to see Hawaii, but to see Hawaii as safe red, but there was a very strong Republican incumbent there, Linda Lingle, um, who won re-election very handily in the states. It's weird to see Hawaii red in 2006, but that's essentially why. So let's go to 2008, and let's start back on the Senate map. 2008, if the Senate map looks very familiar to 2020, that's because it's the exact same map. So as you can see, Democrats had 51 Senate seats in 2000, after 2006. They gained 8 seats in 2008. This was, concurrent with the presidential election in which Barack Obama defeated John McCain by an astounding margin. And Democrats had very good results all around. They gained in Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, Alaska, even though Obama lost the state. But this was very surprising. Of course, there was a scandal with Ted Stevens, which is probably what made this a flip. Minnesota, an extremely close race that wasn't called for months until after the election. That was, of course, Al Franken. Virginia with Mark Warner. Kay Hagan in North Carolina, and Gene Shaheen in New Hampshire. I believe that was all the flips. Yeah, because it was 8 flips. I think I counted all of them. Yep. So 2008 was very good results for the Democrats on that level. Let's look at the governorships. Democrats gained a seat in Missouri with Jay Nixon, no relation to Richard Nixon. Um, But in the House, that was their best performance. Democrats won 257 seats to the Republicans 178. They turned this map. They locked it down. They won a seat in Idaho, for God's sake. They won the majority in Mississippi, and they won North Dakota, I'm sorry, North Dakota and South Dakota. I mixed them up for some reason. They won, they won all around. They won across the board in 2008. This was very good for them. Of course, it had to do with the Great Recession and George W. Bush's. He was even more unpopular by then. This was, of course, he was a lame duck president at this point. He was term limited. And these were very good results for the Democratic Party. So as you can see, these have been massive blue waves we've been talking about. But let's go to 2010. 2010 was not such a great year for the Democratic Party. Republicans ended up picking up 6 seats in the Senate. Technically 7 if you count Massachusetts with that special election, but that was not at the time. That was not at on election day. That was in January 2010. They picked up Pennsylvania, which was a flip because Arlen Specter had switched to the Democratic Party in 2009, and he lost the primary to Joe Sestak. So that is why that was a flip. Republicans also flipped Indiana. Evan Bayh decided not to run. Illinois was very surprising. Ron Johnson in Wisconsin defeated Russ Feingold. Blanche Lincoln lost to John Bozeman. In Arkansas, North Dakota was a sweep for John Hoeven. This was a retiring Democratic held seat too. He was a very good candidate. So Republicans did very well, but they were not able to win the Senate majority. And the reason why is because the Democrats had so much room to fall, and that was part of the reason why they lost so badly in 2010. But they were able to keep the Senate. The House, on the other hand, was not such a good did not look very good for the Democratic Party. Republicans ended up picking up or flipping 63 seats in the House. 63. They turned a 257 majority map for Democrats into a 242 Republican seat majority. Look at how much the map changes. Let's even look. Yeah, there's only like 3 Democratic pickups. Yeah, barely. Yeah, barely pretty much pickups. Any pickups. The Delaware was a pickup because there was a retiring Republican incumbent, but Delaware is a safe blue state anyway. Excuse me. Um, so, yeah, as you can see, these were pretty good years. 2012 was not necessarily such a blue wave or red wave year. This was the year Barack Obama was reelected. Democrats did pretty much better on every single level. Of course, I forgot to show the governor's election maps, but I'm not going to be showing those quite as much. I'm just going to be talking about the Senate and House right now. But in 2012, it was a pretty neutral environment. Barack Obama got reelected, but by a smaller amount against Mitt Romney. Republicans won the House, but they lost multiple seats that they had won in 2010. Democrats ended up gaining seats in the Senate. They won. The only seat gain the Republicans made was in Nebraska because Ben Nelson did not run, and so that gave the Republicans an inherent advantage in that state. And in 2014 was much worse than 2010 for Democrats. They had a 55 seat majority in the Senate or 55 to 45 seat majority in the Senate. But 2014 was very bad for Barack Obama and for the Democratic Party. You can see how red this map is. Republicans won 54 Senate seats to Democrats 46. They flipped seats in Montana, South Dakota, Iowa, Colorado, Alaska, Arkansas, Louisiana, North Carolina, West Virginia, And I believe that's it. Yeah, those were 9 Senate seats. Mark Warner, who won by 31% in 2008, only won by 0.81% in 2014. This was an extremely close race against Ed Gillespie, a lot closer than most people thought. This was an insane map, and look at the House map. I mean, this is hilarious to look at actually. 247 Republican seats to Democrats 188. They couldn't even break 190 seats in this map. This is by far the worst year on record for the Democratic Party in the 21st century. In 2016, it was pretty much a neutral environment. Democrats ended up gaining in the Senate and the House. Of course, Donald Trump was elected president. Surprisingly, and Republicans did outperform expectations, especially on the presidential level. In the Senate, though, there were, two races that were pretty much no one expected to go the way they did. Ron Johnson won in Wisconsin against Russ Feingold by a pretty large margin, larger than Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in the state by. And so that was a big surprise, especially because Feingold was considered to be, Johnson was a very vulnerable incumbent. Same in Pennsylvania with Pat Toomey, though he did do worse than Ron Johnson, but he was expected. I think that most people thought he would have an easier time winning. But you can see that there was a lot of cross. If you look at the presidential map, you can see there was some crossover support for Republicans in the Senate races. Missouri was also pretty interesting because Trump won the state by 18 points, which, was a very strong margin for a Republican, the strongest, in decades. Yet Roy Blunt only won by 3 points, and he was a very unpopular incumbent. He's the same Roy Blunt who's now retiring from the Senate, and, Eric Schmidt won that primary a couple days ago to replace him. So, he probably, that was probably one of the reasons why he wanted to leave. But he has also been in Congress for a very long time. Not so much in the Senate, but he was in the House for a while beforehand. As you can see, 2016 was a pretty good year for the Republican Party, but the Democrats did manage to flip seats in Illinois, which is a no-brainer. But Maggie Hassan was able to barely defeat Kelly Ayotte in the state. So this is really, where you start to see a little, more where you start to see the term blue wave or red wave kind of start to decline. Let's look at 2018, which is a very good year for the Democratic Party on pretty much all levels. They took back the House by a pretty large margin, not nearly what they had in 2008, but they won it nonetheless by two. They got Republicans down to 200 seats. They got 235 seats. The governor's elections, they made countless gains. They won Nevada, New Mexico, Kansas, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois was also a flip. I know that's surprising. Maine was also a flip. Um, but look at the Senate. The Senate was really the outlier because there were a lot of vulnerable Democratic incumbents in 2018, and a couple of them were not expected to lose. Heidi Heitkamp, I would argue, was, I don't think a lot of people would challenge me on this, but, well, first of all, before I do that, look at how many states that went blue in 2018 that Trump won in 2016. So you can tell the 2018 was a blue wave year, by most accounts. But it wasn't so much in the Senate. A lot of Democrats were able to hold on, yes, but more than, about four of them lost their re-elections. Democrats did win in Nevada and Arizona, so, props to them. That kept Republicans from getting 55 seats in the Senate. But still, Democrats did not do nearly as well as they hoped, and they weren't expected to win the Senate in 2018, just like Republicans are not expected by 538 to win the Senate now. Let's actually pull that up. I'm sorry, I told you guys this is going to be disorganized. Yeah, I hope you guys are having a great day, by the way. I'm sorry, I've been forgetting to say that in my most recent videos. So as you can see, Democrats are slightly favored to win the Senate. It's pretty much a toss-up at this point on 538. I know a lot of people say 538 is not very accurate, and yeah, they've had, their misses, their hits and misses over the years, but in 2018, I'm not going to pull it up right now, but pretty much this was essentially the Senate map they had predicted. The only seats that they really, did not expect Republicans to flip was in Indiana with Joe Donnelly as the Democratic incumbent, excuse me, and Florida with Bill Nelson. But I would argue, you see 10 states that Donald Trump won in 2016, the Democrats were defending in 2018. So it makes sense why this map was so unfavorable to them. If, Hillary Clinton had won the presidency in 2016, you can bet that 2018 would have been pretty much an ass whooping for the Democratic Party. Excuse me for my language, but it's true. You probably would have seen Republicans hold on to Arizona and Nevada. You probably would have seen Ohio go red. West Virginia would have almost definitely gone red. Joe Manchin did not have that same appeal that he had in a 20 and or does not have that same appeal that he does now, or that same power that he holds now in the 50-50 Senate. Bob Casey Jr. probably would have held on. Debbie Stabenow might have held on, but I think John Tester would have gotten kicked out. Tammy Baldwin might have gotten kicked out too, but she got lucky because she had a bad Republican challenger. I mean, a good one for her, but bad for Republicans. But as you can see, these four Democratic incumbents: Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, Claire McCaskill in Missouri, Joe Donnelly in Indiana, and Bill Nelson in Florida. They were really the only, these are the ones that lost. And it was really Heidi Heitkamp was really the only one that nobody really expected to win. This one was pretty much a long shot for Democrats from the start because North Dakota, as you can imagine, is a very Republican state. It voted for Trump in 2016 by 36 points. Now, this was a blue wave, and Heidi Heitkamp was the incumbent, so she didn't lose by 36 points, but she lost by 11. And that's not very good for an incumbent. And all of these senators voted against Brett Kavanaugh's nomination. That especially hurt Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota because a lot of North Dakotans wanted Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. Heitkamp was a pretty, moderate Democratic senator. I would argue one of the most moderate, not like Joe Manchin, but she had a pretty warm relationship with Donald Trump. I won't get too much into it, but either way, she lost by 10 points, and she barely won in 2012, so this race was already going to be an uphill climb for her, and she ended up losing to Kevin Kramer. In Missouri, Josh Hawley defeated Claire McCaskill. This one was this was a lot larger of a margin for Hawley than most people expected. He won by 6 points. I think McCaskill was also hurt by her vote against her vote, her no vote on Brett Kavanaugh. Same in Indiana with Joe Donnelly. I think that Donnelly was one of the better incumbents. Mike Braun was an okay challenger. He won by 6 points as well. But this race was expected to be a dead heat going into Election Day. It was not. Donnelly didn't do so well. He won in 2012 because Richard Lugar lost the Republican primary. If you guys don't know, Richard Lugar was the Indiana's longest serving senator. He was a very much moderate Republican. Most Republicans today would probably call him a rhino, but he was a very moderate Republican, and he lost to Richard Murdoch in the 2012 Indiana Senate primary. He was and Murdoch was a very controversial candidate. I won't get into that. Yeah, look it up. In Tennessee, you might be surprised to see that being likely. The reason why this race was somewhat competitive, I mean, it was expected to be very competitive between Phil Bredesen, who was the former governor of the state, but Marshall Blackburn did very well in Tennessee. The last poll showed this being a dead heat, essentially. Excuse me, I can't talk. But it showed Blackburn and Bredesen pretty much tied, but Blackburn ended up winning by 11 points. She did a lot better than polls expected. And, this is a pretty close margin for a state like Tennessee, but, this was, I think that Phil Bredesen was kind of pushing it here. He was a very popular governor in the state, a lot more moderate of a Democrat. I think he could have won this race, had things gone, a lot better for Democrats, but I think it was hard from the start. Florida was the big surprise, though, because Rick Scott, Bill Nelson this race was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Rick Scott was, usually the underdog, but he ended up winning against Bill Nelson very, very narrowly. And this race wasn't called for until a couple weeks after Election Day. This is really the biggest surprise. Democrats were able to retain most of their seats, but as you can see, Republicans ended up winning 53 seats to Democrats' 47. So this was, not such a great result for the Democratic Party. I would say, probably the best that they could have gotten was, I don't know, maybe a 51 gotten. It was, keep it, because at this time it was a 51 to 49 seat majority for Republicans. The reason why it wasn't 52 is because Republicans lost a seat in Alabama during a special election in 2017, so that gave Democrats an additional seat. So I think really the best the Democrats could have done was probably, maybe tie the Senate if they won in Missouri, but that was kind of a long shot anyway. North Dakota, though, was pretty much off, was pretty much out of the question, though, that Heidi Heitkamp was going to lose. But and you can see in Texas, even Texas with Ted Cruz was closer with Beto O'Rourke. Maybe if Democrats funneled more money into Texas, than defending Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, they might have been able to defeat Ted Cruz. And 2020, was a bit different. This is probably the most neutral year we've had so far. It was a slight blue wave, and a lot of that had to do with the COVID pandemic, was with Trump's unpopularity. But Democrats were expected to be a lot more competitive, especially in the Senate election. So let's look at the presidential results. Democrats did very, very, did pretty well in the presidency. But polls overwhelmingly overestimated them. Wisconsin was expected to go to Biden by almost double digits. It only went to him by less than a point. Michigan was also possibly a double-digit state. Pennsylvania was pretty accurate. Georgia was pretty accurate. Arizona was pretty accurate. Nevada did overestimate Biden in its polling, but they did do. He still did pretty well. He won the state by pretty much the exact same margin. But Florida and North Carolina, were expected to go to Biden. They went to Trump. On the House level, Republicans did end up making net gains in the House. That was a big surprise to a lot of people. They were able to get Democrats down to 222 seats, 222. That's actually kind of funny. Cursed. This is cursed because we're in 2022 now. I never noticed that. But this is, one of the reasons why I think Democrats are pretty much set to they're almost assured to lose House control. But I think the Senate's a lot more up in the air, but I'll get to that soon. In 2020, though, a lot more races were expected to be competitive. You can see that this map is pretty 50-50. I mean, technically is. Democrats were able to tie the Senate, with these Georgia runoffs, and with Vice President Harris, they were able to, they have a tie-breaking vote, so technically they've held it. So this is their narrowest majority in the 21st century. The only time over time that this Senate has been 50-50. I think this is actually a very rare occurrence for the Senate to be this divided. I think there was one time in the 19th century, and then of course 2000, it was 50-50. That was a historically close election. So Democrats did end up underperforming in the Senate elections as well. In North Carolina, Cal Cunningham was expected to win against Tom Tillis. In Maine, Susan Collins was very vulnerable, but she ended up defeating Sarah Gideon by 9 points. I think this was, probably the biggest outlier. Almost everybody was expecting this race, for Collins to lose in this race. She was not leading, and, most of the polls, she was, pretty much Sarah Gideon was destroying her. But Maine likes its centrist, and you kind of have to remember that can that'll be useful. For my predicting of Janet Mills winning in Maine's governor's race. In South Carolina, Jamie Harrison was a pretty strong challenger to Lindsey Graham, but a lot of people were kind of like, eh. Mississippi, this was kind of not really that competitive. People thought there might be something there with Mike Espy, but after he lost the runoff in 2018 by 7 points, the reason why this race was so close was one, because it was a blue wave year, and it was initially very close because there were two Republicans running. Hyde Smith, of course, had been appointed to succeed Thad Cochran after he resigned. Texas was, expected to be competitive, but not like in 2018. MJ Hager was not the best nominee Democrats could have put forth. Honestly, Beto O'Rourke probably could have had a pretty good shot at defeating John Cornyn, but he was a very good senator, or a very popular senator. Not going to give my personal opinion on him. I'm not a big fan of John Cornyn, for the record. Um, In Kansas, Roger Marshall won by 11 points. He actually outperformed Pat Roberts his performance in 2014. Barbara Bollier was a pretty good nominee for Democrats, but she did not end up making much of a dent. Colorado was very good. This was a pretty, Colorado was pretty accurate in polling because Cory Gardner was pretty much screwed from the start. He only won by 2 points in a red wave year, and Colorado was already getting bluer, and it voted for Biden by 13 points. Of course, Gardner did do better because he was the incumbent. Um, or did better than Trump, because he was the incumbent, but John Hickenlooper still beated him, or still beated him. That's proper grammar right there. He still beat him by 9 points. In Montana, this race was expected to be very competitive with Steve Daines going up against Steve Bullock. Yeah, two Steves here. Bullock was the popular Democratic governor of the state who was term limited, and Republicans, but Steve Daines clearly had the advantage here, and it was a federal race, so you have to keep in mind that Montana also had another Democratic senator, John Tester, so they wanted to keep their Senate delegation divided. In Iowa, this was also a pretty big upset. Joni Ernst was a very vulnerable incumbent. Teresa Greenfield was a pretty good Democratic candidate. She outpaced Joe Biden in the state, but she was actually this race was very tight throughout the entire campaign season. Especially leading up into election day. But Iowa was Iowa did not really surmount to anything. Alaska was also surprisingly competitive. A lot of people forget about this one. Dan Sullivan had only won by 2 points in 2014 against Mark Begich, who was the incumbent. So there's a reason for that. Al Gross was a independent who got the Democratic Party's backing in their nomination pretty much. Gross was, this could have been, this was expected to be, a possible sleeper flip for Democrats, but it was not. So, yeah, Alaska didn't really surmount to anything. Michigan was also expected to be a lot larger of a margin for Gary Peters. It was not. Same with New Mexico and Arizona. So Democrats really underperformed in the Senate in 2020. There's a possibility that in 2022, some of these races will be wrong. I think the races, the ones that I really disagree with 538 is Catherine Cortez Masto winning in Nevada. I think Adam Laxalt will pull out a victory there. And in Georgia, this race is statistically tied, but they've had Warnock losing and Walker winning for their pretty much their entire for their entire Senate prediction history. I don't agree with that. I think Walker will lose to Warnock. I agree with Pennsylvania. I agree with Arizona. I agree with Wisconsin. Ohio, yeah, I agree with that. North Carolina, I might put this in the likely column, but I think it's pretty fair. Florida, yeah. Colorado, I agree with that. So, it's really just these two races that I disagree with. Really just one with Nevada. So yeah, so let's get to my point here. If what Republicans are expecting to be a red wave year, why is the generic ballot like this? And they may say, well, in 2014, Democrats were leading the generic ballot up until this point, and Republicans just took off in September and then won the generic ballot by like 5 points by come the fall. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure the generic ballot will get better for Democrats or for Republicans. We also have to remember in 2014, the numbers were going down for Democrats because they had consistently led in the generic ballot. And the truth is that we've become a lot more polarized since 2014. That's the main key here. Polarization is why wave years are starting to become extinct. We may have wave year in certain areas of the country, but as 2018 proved to us, not everything is solid. Republicans won the Senate, but despite Democrats overwhelmingly winning the House. And I think we're going to see a similar situation here. This is my current Senate prediction. In case you haven't seen it yet, of course, I think the Senate will be split 50-50. Democrats will narrowly hang on. All this really means is, because I think 2024 Republicans will win back the Senate, but we will get to 2024 when that comes. I'm, excited. I will admit I'm a little tired of talking about 2022 because I've been talking about it for so long. But I am excited for us to finally get these results in, and I'm excited to see what 2024 brings us. But I do think the Republicans will probably take back the Senate in 2024 if they don't get it this year, which I don't think they will. But the generic ballot has been, very tight, and I think Democrats will end up taking the lead here within the next couple of days. So, what's my main point here? The point is that even with Biden's unpopularity, even with Democrats' struggles, they're starting to do better. They passed the bipartisan gun legislation. They look like they might pass this marriage equality bill. They passed this veterans bill, recently, despite, that Republican interference. Manchin and Schumer look like they've made a deal on this new version of Build Back Better. It's not really the Build Back Better bill anymore, but it's essentially the new version. So I think Democrats are going to win. I think that Nevada is going to flip red, but I think that Pennsylvania will flip blue, and this counteracts everything, in the Senate. Excuse me, that's my phone. But anyways, with all my rambling, it's that you can't, just take numbers like Joe Biden's approval rating and take that as fact and assume that it is automatically going to be a red wave year because Barack Obama was actually more popular than Biden was in 2010 at this point. Um, excuse me, I have to find his approval rating and compare it to that. Don't worry, I'm almost done. I know this video has gone on for a long time. What the heck? Cycle. I'm sorry about that. Recycle paper towels. Where is Biden's approval rating? There it is. So as you can see, Biden's approval rating has gone up slightly, but it's still pretty bad. As of today, August 4th. So let's compare the net approvals. Biden is down 16 points in polling. Obama is down 3 points, or was down 3 points at this point in his presidency. See, you have to remember that approval ratings of the president don't always mean everything. The GOP has alienated a lot of voters, just as the Democratic Party has alienated a lot of more moderate voters. So I think we're heading up I think we're heading into one of the most competitive election seasons that this country has ever seen. It'll be very exciting to watch. And yeah, we'll just see what happens. But I don't think that this is going to be a red wave year. I think the right term to use, and the right term that I think everybody should be using, is a slight red wave year. I would have agreed with the term red wave back in November of last year after Glenn Youngkin won the governor's race in Virginia. But I really don't think that this is going to be that large of a red wave. Probably will be a red wave in the House, but it's not going to be an overwhelming 2010 style red wave. Democrats also have a lot less room to fall. So I don't think Republicans are going to get like 270 seats in the Senate, or sorry, in the House, or 270 seats in the Senate. Anyways, without all my rambling, thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video, share, turn on notifications. Check out my main channel, Interactor127, and my comrade's channel, Growling Zoo 666. I really hope that he gets back to you guys soon. I'm gonna need to get on him with that. Yeah, but I will see you guys soon, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics, and hopefully for not as long. See ya.